Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Academy. My name is Tom Scarda, and I am your host today. And we are bringing some great information to you about franchising. We have a great person with us today, Tom Spadea, who is a franchise attorney. But if you've never listened to the show before, this is all about franchising. Everything you want to know: how to buy a franchise, how to sell a franchise, how to turn your business into a franchise, which is Tom's specialty, actually. And so we are all about franchising. It's a one-stop shop for everything that you need. So if you're looking at franchising and you need help, please reach out and let's have a conversation. I might be able to help you with validation, talking to franchise owners, and all the stuff that needs to get done, including reviewing of a franchise agreement, which is Tom Spadea's forte. So today I have with me Tom Spadea from Spadea Liana. It's a franchise firm out of Philadelphia. They work nationally and I think internationally with franchise companies, helping companies to go from a 1 unit, 2 unit mom and pop to national recognized franchise brand. Tom, I want to welcome you in. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Oh, this is so fantastic. So even before you got into law, you were involved in franchising. Is that right?
I was. So I've had the law firm for 10 years now, and we started it, right when I was out of law school. And before that, I sold franchises for a couple of different big brands. And I got into selling franchises from being actually a franchise consultant and broker about 20. So I've been in the franchising space for about 20 years, half of that time selling. I like to joke, I'm one of the few, if any, franchise attorneys that paid for law school by selling franchises during the day while I went at night.
You are probably the only one I know of, for sure.
I think so.
That is just fantastic. And you're based in Philly, but I know you're national. Do you help with international as well?
We do. I mean, most of the international, we have a number of international clients. Most of it are brands who are overseas who want to come into the United States. We do have a number of emerging brands, which is really where we play. Most of our clients are under 100 units. And a number of them have gone overseas, and so we'll help them go overseas. So yeah, if it's franchising, we're in the mix somehow.
Why should somebody consider franchising their business?
That's a great question, a question that I talk about a lot. I mean, the big answer is, look, we're all in business, right? I like to joke, I'm an attorney, but I'm not really keeping people out of jail or defending your First Amendment rights. I mean, we're here to give you an ROI, to help give you a pathway towards some level of wealth. A franchisee is looking to build a business to, let's say, pay for their kids' college. You go into franchising and you become a franchisor to pay for your grandkids' college. You're going in for the big play. It's to get incremental growth. People call me and say, hey, I want to franchise my business. I have a couple of units. And, I always say, look, if your goal is to double or triple your income, don't franchise them. Read the E-Myth, get a couple managers, open up another location. But if you want a shot at 10, 20, 50X, that's where franchising, it's much closer to sort of a software play than it is just a growing your business. You step into a new industry, and that's what we like to kind of help guide people towards getting into that industry on the franchisor side of things.
I love that explanation. I never heard that before. The children and the grandchildren analogy. I'm really good friends with Harold Kestenbaum, who works with you. Franchise firm. He has a great book out about franchising your business, and he talks about those kind of relationships. A lot of times it's like, I think what I read it a long time ago now, but he said something to the effect of, when you start a franchise, it's like marrying into a family that to a person that has 6 kids and they're all whiny. So,
well, that's it. Well, Harold is my partner, and we've been working together about 3 years now, and he is the guru of franchising. I mean, Harold has forgotten more in franchising than most people know. And I agree. And I've learned from him and have watched him with the clients, and that's it. It's a relationship business. We can write the documents and we can give you legal documents, but at the end of the day, a good franchisor is someone who can manage those relationships, manage expectations, and really be a coach and a teacher. for their franchisees to be successful.
That's exactly right. And I know Howard also says if you're looking at franchising your business and you love your business, you probably shouldn't franchise because you're not going to be in that business anymore. But now you're in franchise sales and support, not making cupcakes or fixing cars or whatever it is that you love to do for business.
Well, and even if you love it and you are spending too much time in it, many times we'll tell people, look, if you're spending 50, 60 hours a week making cupcakes or fixing cars, you're not ready. Your business itself has to be looked at almost as the first franchise. You have to teach someone else how to run that business day to day. And then you can turn your attention and focus on becoming a franchisor.
So on that note, Tom, a question I really always think about is what makes somebody or a franchise, or what makes a business ready for franchising? Is there any thresholds or any kind of rules or regulations that they need to follow so you could say, oh yeah, okay, you're ready to franchise now. This is, or is it subjective?
Well, I'd say the rules and regulations are kind of step two. That's obviously what we help with. You should have a federal trademark and all of the stuff. You need an FDD, a franchise disclosure document, but I always tell people, don't focus on that. Think of the soft part, the business part. I mean, you need a successful business that is scalable. I always like to say, if you're able to generate a reasonable income in a close geography, that's kind of a rule. There are exceptions, but restaurants are a good example, but they're probably only a third of the franchisors out there. Service businesses, it's boots on the ground. What franchisors are looking for isn't necessarily money, even though you got to write the $50,000 check and you're like, I'm spending all this money. The reality is franchisors are chasing the human capital. They're chasing that skilled leader and recruiter and someone who's going to execute the business model at the local level. So if you're within a 1 county or 2 county area generating $1 million in revenue and putting 100, 200 grand in your pocket, if you have a business like mine isn't really franchisable. I have clients all over. I have clients in Texas. I can do Zoom, right? What COVID taught us. But I've always been like that. There's no advantage for me to opening an office in Texas. I can service those clients just as well. So that's how a franchisor should be thinking. What's the local component? They're going to know something about Cleveland, Ohio, that the franchisor in Philadelphia is not going to know. Now, maybe this is a business that's franchisable because it's going to be easier and better and more efficient. So it's really about efficiency long term.
Yeah, I love that. And also, to be honest and blunt, if you're a business and you want to franchise, what you're doing is expanding with other people's money.
Yeah.
That's to be honest about it, that's how I feel.
So I'll take the flip side though to say that you're also leaving the lion's share of the profit on the table and the risk. So it's other people's money, so you're shifting the risk, but you're only taking your small sliver of that royalty. You're taking that 6% or 7% that you still have to produce, whereas a good small business can be making double-digit percentages returns. So you're shifting the risk, but you're also shifting away some of those profits.
Right. So it's really a symbiotic relationship, and everyone's helping each other, which
the good ones.
As a franchise owner, that's what I loved about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the franchisors, for the franchisees that are looking into that business, that's what they need to research. How is that relationship? How is the franchisor when things don't quite go as planned? Are they picking up the phone or are you getting a letter from a lawyer? Because if you're getting a letter from the lawyer on the first angle, might sound ironic coming from a lawyer, but that's probably not a franchisor you want to be involved with. And we coach that. Hey, look, you don't want to come out guns blazing. You got to get empathy behind it. You're the coach. And so you as a franchisor have to take ownership of when maybe it didn't get communicated so well. Maybe they don't quite understand what you meant. Why aren't they complying to your satisfaction? Go back, and now there are outliers and you do have to get tough sometimes, but for the most part, they're the good relationships and the franchisees in those find more success, I believe.
Do you think that the smaller, newer, emerging franchises are less kind of stringent with like the rules and coming at you with an attorney, as opposed to the big brands, the names that we all know across the country, where your store is really just a number. They don't really know you. There's not really a personality. there's no connection, and they're more likely just to send a letter because you didn't hit the benchmark royalties or whatever.
I think it can cut both sides, because sometimes we have emerging brands that they don't have the maturity, and they look at their contract and they're like, but they're not allowed to do that. How come they did that? And they think that they're a giant brand that has all this weight. And you got to kind of coach them down and say, yeah, I know they're not allowed to do that, but let's have a conversation before we go guns blazing. So sometimes I have found that sometimes the newer brands are a little more aggressive where they shouldn't be, because they think a little bit, they don't quite understand it. And a mature brand is going to be like, well, we get it. Now, the difference is the rules have solidified. If you've been around for 15 years franchising and you have a couple hundred units or 1,000 units, the rules have really solidified. So you can say with a little bit more certainty, look, you're out of bounds, because we know this is out of bounds. We've read it. So a newer system can be a little bit more of the Wild West but you also have a direct line. So I tell people, there's no good or bad answer. Just like people, and I'm sure, Tom, this happens to you. You go to a family reunion or a college reunion, or you go see some of your buddies, and they're like, tell me, Tom, what's the best franchise out there? I know what's the best one? And I give the lawyer answer. It depends, because it's a personality fit. So there are some people who really want tighter guardrails. Maybe they came from big corporate, maybe the military, and they really want to be told what to do every day. The difference in a big system is a more detailed operations manual, but you're not going to talk to the CEO. If you join a brand with 5, they may have a lot of stuff written on paper, but they haven't figured out the training system. But what you get is human access. I mean, I think personally, I would be better in a 5 unit. I'm a people person. I'd rather have the conversation. So there's really no right answer. It's just, that's what you need to learn in your investigation.
Right. And you need to kind of do a little self-inflection about what is going to be right for you, because what's right for me is not right for you. And I give the non-lawyer answer when somebody asks me the question about the franchise. I said, well, it depends, but it's like saying, who's the best looking person in Hollywood? It depends. One might like a blonde, one might like a brunette, one likes one that cooks, so it's like, there's no right answer.
That's a great, there's no right answer. It really depends. They have to go through this search. And the same thing on the franchisor. It's funny, the risk profile is a lot different sometimes franchisors, when they get to 10 or 20 units, their first 3 franchisees are the biggest pain in the whole system, because they have this like mindset that they own the brand. Like, hey, we were with you when you were nothing. And so they sometimes it's like, look, maybe you should just sell, because we're in a different place of where we were. So yeah, no, it depends.
It's funny. If you probably know, so my first franchise that I purchased was something called Maui Wowie Smoothies back in 2000.
Yeah.
Right. So you might even know Michael Haith, who was the CEO back then, and he'll tell you stories if you ever run into him at a meeting. I used to call him every damn day.
Because you just wanted to know, you were thirst for knowledge, right? You're like, I just want to know. But that's what's great about this business is that, franchisors have to know that that's their business. They have created something that worked for them. And now their business is trying to teach someone to do it the way they did it, or maybe a little more improved, and you're paying for their mistakes. I'm sure Michael made a lot of mistakes that you were trying to make sure you didn't make. And that's what got you to the next level. And it's just this evolution. And the franchisees, I always say, look, go into it knowing you're renting a business model. And there's nothing wrong with that. So how much money all those questions that they ask, hey, you're not buying an apartment building with a straight ROI. Nobody knows. You're getting a business model with a lot of the unknowns worked out, a lot of the risk worked out, but there's still unknowns and there's still risk. And you know what the biggest unknown is? How's a franchisee going to be as a business owner? Nobody knows that until they get out, because there's so much, some people have fear of being in business and they freeze. They don't know what to do. They're used to being in this corporate. So they have to take a real long soul search of that. And they just need to execute,
Right. That's what it comes down to, is just execute. And it's funny because I come from like a government job going into franchising. And as I took disc profile test as an example. It said the last thing you should do is be in business or be in sales. Um, and but I bought the franchise anyway. And, in my second year, I became franchisee of the year, and it just with the production, because failure was not an option. That was it. I had to do it, whatever it
Right.
was. I had to do it. And I loved it. I worked harder than I ever did in my life, but I loved every minute of it, and I wouldn't change it at all. Not a minute of that. But I want to get back to franchise law, because that's why I had you on. So,
Yeah.
so what do you like about being a franchise attorney? What kind of lights your fire?
What lights my fire is dealing with entrepreneurs. So we've been in business 10 years now, and we've sort of gone narrower and deeper. I mean, we represent a few hundred franchisor brands, mostly emerging. Our goal is to help them get to private equity, cash out, great, but that's a different animal. When we started, we represented a couple of banks. We were doing SBA closings. I've never represented governments, but I'm sure governments are just like the SBA. No one can make a decision. It's all by committee, and their decision is risk aversion. And so what I love about the area law we practice is we deal with decision makers. These are, entrepreneurs. They've bet absolutely everything. They're not afraid of risk. In fact, sometimes they're too comfortable with risk, and our job is to we give them guardrails. Our job is to say, look, I know you're going to make a million decisions. We want to give you good guardrails. We're preparing you for the future. It's why you and I talked before. We've invested in software. We've invested in a team approach. We have client relations people, kind of like software companies, who they're not their lawyer or their paralegal, but they're an additional layer of resource. And, we don't bill hourly, because entrepreneurs are not going to call you if you bill hourly because they don't want to see $75 on the bill. You're not allowed to tell them jokes anymore or ask about their kids because they don't want to get 6-minute increments. So we've re-engineered the process. And I think the direct answer, what I love most is our clients, these entrepreneurs who have literally bet everything. And I've had a few. We have the fortune of being in here 10 years. I've had people we've started with that could literally barely pay their legal bills. They could barely get the FDD over the finish line. And they just muscled through. They executed. They got the right franchisees. And these guys are sitting on $20, $30 million businesses, some of them who have exited. Man, that's personal satisfaction that we were a part of that journey for them. And it's great. I love it. It's really enjoyable.
So fantastic. So as a franchise attorney, your whole life revolves around something they call the franchise disclosure document. Is that right?
It is the FDD.
The FDD.
So the FDD, if you're on the franchisee piece of it, it's a data point. It's information. So, the best way to describe it, it's probably anywhere from a 200 to 300 page document. Half of it is, so 60 to 80 pages of it, the beginning is a disclosure. It's 23 items. It explains apples to apples. Have you ever been bankrupt? Have you ever done this? What's the expenses to get in? So it's kind of this Venn diagram, two intersecting circles, the disclosure part of it, and then the actual franchise agreement in the back end. And it's really a protection for both parties. So the rule is it protects franchisees because it levels the information playing field. It gives franchisees enough information to make an informed decision. The background, most important item is 20, has every franchisee listed. They got to pick up the phone and call. And it gives you kind of a thumbnail sketch of their stuff about the revenue and that. But I always tell people, don't get into the weeds on the numbers. It's the relationship part of it. It's the what you need to know about how they are. Are they having a lot of lawsuits with their franchisees? These kind of things. And so we write that, and that protects the franchisee because it gives them information. However, one thing franchisees get wrong is that that's not the most important document for them. The most important document for a franchisee is the franchise agreement, which is an exhibit. And because, a third of what's in the franchise agreement is replayed in the FDD, they run out of steam and they don't read the franchise agreement because it's in the back. If I were playing it, I'd reverse it because the franchise agreement's the lease, right? That's the lease you're signing. And that's the agreement to use the trademarks and go into business. That's the contract. And so once you sign the franchise agreement and pay your fee, as long as you got a proper FDD, it was properly disclosed, and there was nothing, and it was up to speed, it burns off, right? That's the booster rocket. That thing is gone. All you care about now is that franchise group. The reason I say that it's a protection also for the franchisor is that for the franchisor, and this I have this, we'll call it a discussion with my emerging brands. You got to get this document right. It's not just a piece of paper. If you don't really get it right and proper, then you're jeopardizing that franchise agreement, which is the goal of this whole process. Your whole business, our whole business, is to get an enforceable franchise agreement. If there's something wrong there, if you're not filed, if you gave them the right document, if one of the partners didn't find, if they didn't hold it for 14 days, a myriad of problems can happen. Now you call into question whether or not that agreement's even enforceable, and you've just given them your trade secrets, given them your name, taught them about the business. So I reverse it. I actually think the FDD, that document that we sort of hold that gets updated every year, that's a protection for the franchisor. That's the shield that protects all their intellectual property. Because if they mess that up, then they're giving away their secrets to someone who's essentially a stranger, because they can just say, I'm walking. I'm going to change my name and I'm walking, and I'm taking all the information you taught me and I'm walking out the door with it. And that's what they should be afraid of. They're entrepreneurs, so they're not afraid of a lot of things, but we try to kind of get them into that mindset of why that document, it's just so important. And so, yeah, we write lots of them. We spend a lot of time on getting that document right.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it a true statement to say that the FDD is really just a blown up version of the franchise agreement, kind of more explaining in detail some of the items?
I think it's no, I think it's more than that. I think that's why I go back to that Venn diagram of the intersecting circles. So I think you have a portion of that. When's the renewal? What am I paying in the royalties? But there's a whole host of information in the FDD that doesn't show up in the franchise agreement. For instance, the training schedule. Who are your trainers? The item 2 people, which is the management team. Go Google those folks. Whether there's been lawsuits, none of that shows up in the franchise agreement. The affiliated parties. Hey, am I buying the t-shirts from Uncle Sam, from Uncle Joe, who's related? And not that stuff, none of it should make you say yes or no. It's all a data point to sort of go into your hopper and put on a column, and nothing's going to be perfect. So yeah, no, I think they're both doing different work, and I think they both should be looked at in great detail by anybody who's going to sign a franchise agreement.
Very interesting. But you said the most important item, in your opinion, is item 20 with the list of franchise owners, right? So what are you looking for when you're looking at item 20?
Well, you're looking to tease out how these folks are, right? I mean, there's no one's going to tell you the story better than someone who walked in your shoes. So you're going to find people who've been in that business, and they've been in the trenches with the franchisee and the franchisor. And, they're going to know. They're going to say, yeah, do you regret it? I think people get too focused on they're going to be the ones who tell you how much money they're making. Look, if you want to be a lawyer and you call up 20 lawyers and you're focused on how much money they make, are you really going to learn what it's like to be a lawyer? Do they like it? What's it like? What's a day in the life? Is this something I can identify with? It's the relationship questions. The difference between item 19 is the other one with the financials. But to me, the financials are like one of those French paintings from the 1800s that my wife loves. It's like you take your glasses off and it's kind of foggy. It gets you in the direction. You're like, yeah, that's kind of a park and that's a bridge. That's what item 19 does. Is this a business that generates a couple $100,000 a year or a couple $1 million a year? Do some people make money? What's the approximate? But don't hang your hat completely on that. The difference is you should just know that should just get you. But what you should hang your hat on is, what are the people like? Can you identify? If you talk to one of these franchisees, can you see yourself in their shoes? That's hard to do. It's hard to figure out, but that's what I think the journey should be is, are you a cultural fit for this brand? And if you're a cultural fit, you have a way better chance of success because you're going to embrace it. I tell people when they ask me, well, what's it take to be a successful franchisee? If the franchisor says do this 10 times a week, do it 20. They're the ones who win in franchising. I mean, it's that simple. I know it sounds pretty flip, but it's that simple. Double down on everything they tell you to do, and you're probably going to be all right.
Yeah, I love that. So everything you're saying, I'm just eating up. This is so great. And I agree with you. When I was in that smoothie concept with Michael back then, he was like, you got to go out and you got to find locations, because it was a special event. And I we had these tiki huts on wheels. We'd roll into like a street fair or whatever it might be. And I told him I was going to go and solicit the Jacob Javits Convention Center in Manhattan. And he said, you're hunting elephants, my friend. I'll never forget this conversation. Don't be disappointed. That afternoon, I came back and I got the gig. And it was our first gig, the Javits Center. It was
That's awesome.
What? And all it was a cold call. But I also called every other venue in New York, 5 boroughs, Long Island, Westchester. He said, call like 5 places. I called like 25 places. And that's how I got it. It was just cold calls.
I mean, that's being a successful franchisee. You're totally right. And so to me, item 20 of the even though I know it's from a legal standpoint, look, the franchise agreement, it's going to be very strict. Beware of a franchise agreement that's not strict, by the way. That's the other kind of take I have as a lawyer. People think like, oh, this guy's going to give me everything I've asked for. Well, then he's going to give the knucklehead down the street everything he asked for. And so that's not really going to help brand standards. You're investing in a brand that you don't have control to police. So it's not so great for you if they're going to give away the store, which is why, of course, and this, you should always have a franchise attorney look at that document if you're a buyer, because we understand as franchise attorneys the relationship. So this is like there's a hidden party to every one of those agreements, and that's the brand. And that's not written down in the agreement. It kind of is in the brand fund and this, but the reality is, back to my analogy of leasing a property, when you have a landlord-tenant relationship, I mean, except maybe you can make an argument on the neighborhood or the mall, whatever, but basically you pay the rent, you get the space. Franchising is different. You have, your Maui Wowie is more valuable 10 years later because of the fact that Michael did such a good job growing that brand. So that meant more than it meant on day one. So your investment itself is in the brand at large. And, you need brand standards. That's going to make the valuable.
That's a brilliant point, a really brilliant point. And people just don't get that. Not some people. And that is really important. It's just like I was sharing with somebody literally this morning, they were like, oh, I'm really upset about, personal guarantees and things like that. And it's like, you have to understand, it's the franchisor has the right to get rid of the numbskull who they let in by accident and is screwing up everything and is messing up your business. You're going to end up selling it for less with this numbskull down the street, where you could have done so much better if they would just get rid of them. And so
it's actually kind of hard for a franchisor. So this is like the empathy piece is when you're a franchisee, if you made a mistake, if you're like, this is a disaster, I can't believe it. I can't believe I thought it was just a TV commercial, but I'm actually making the donuts at 5 a.m. I can't believe I'm waking up and I'm actually doing this. I thought I would love it, but it turns out I hate making the donuts. Fine, Tom, let's sell this business. Let's go out and transfer this business. Not so, now you may take a hit, you may lose some money, but you're getting out. Now the franchisor, no matter all the strict language we put in, you're getting your firstborn, I'm doing a DNA test, we're going to crush you, blah, blah, blah. It's not so easy. It's not so easy. As long as you pay your royalties and you don't do something crazy like change the brand name. But if you have the sign up and you're paying the royalties and you're just kind of a numbskull and you're like a C student or a B- student, franchisor can't get rid of you. I tell franchisors, you're like in France and you just hired somebody for life and you got to now pay their pension. So we got to be really careful the people you pick, because no matter what we say in the agreement, it's not so easy to get rid of a mediocre to poor franchisee, and they bring the whole system down, and they should be selective.
Yeah, and that's important. And I love it's kind of a love-hate thing, but when a franchisor turns around and turns down a candidate that I'm working with, it sucks in the moment, but it really shows integrity. And there's a lot of the brands I work with, they just shut people down. Like, sorry, we're not a good fit.
And they're the best brands to work with because then they're smart, and it's hard for a franchisor to do that. And they don't, but the good ones, well, that's, I've had, as I said, between Harold's practice and mine, and we've seen hundreds of brands go through, and, we talked about what makes a franchisee win. To me, that's what makes a franchisor win. When they go slow, when they turn people down, when they're thinking about the big picture, the unit economics are really what drive the value of a franchisor. And if they have a B player or a C player who just isn't doing a great job, it has an exponential effect on their entire business.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we could get into that whole equation because there's an equation there, but
yeah.
But I want to turn a little bit toward kind of what you do with franchisors.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because we're taping this in March. And of course this will be evergreen and play forever now, but we have the FDD renewal season upon us, which is kind of the bane of my and franchise company's existence because we can't sell franchises.
It's true. It is what pays for my kids' college.
What's that?
I said it is what has paid for my kids' college.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So tell us a little bit about this and how you're helping franchisors make it a little bit easier because it is a pain in the butt.
It is a pain in the butt. I mean, it's a process that we're always getting better at and managing. So most franchisors, their fiscal year ends at the same time as the calendar year, December 31st. Under federal law, they have 120 days to update their FDD. So by the end of April, I just said, it's late March now. We're in the throes of it. Probably have half the clients done, half of them still finishing up. And once the FDD is updated, if they're a national brand, we have our map. States are red or they're green, and for about a third of the states, there's some registration process where they have to then take the FDD, we take the FDD, go to the states. Hey, New York, we changed the FDD, it's time. And so they're going to go what's called dark. It's inevitable, and it's impossible to have it be zero, because when you give them the documents, your old document is now stale. So there's going to be a period of time, either days or weeks, or during the pandemic, honestly, it was months. Out-of-state franchisors in New York, we waited 6 months. Can you imagine how much my phone blew up and the grief we got? But it's first come, first serve. So there's a whole host of strategies that we have, soft strategies of how to get in front of the line, how to mitigate that. Like I said, we have personal relationships with the examiners. We know how to play the game pretty well, but it's still a game. One of the things that we did this year is we have now a software program, because the key is, you as a franchise development guy, transparency is the key, right? What creates anxiety, creates stress, and creates mistakes. And those mistakes can be devastating. If you sell it's bad enough that you're dark and you're not selling a franchise. That's bad. But it's really bad if a deal gets done and they weren't registered properly and they had the wrong document. So for the franchisors here, they know they manage this process. What we do is we essentially have created a platform. It's called our Client Access Portal. The analogy is it's like online banking. So they have instant access to exactly the state of where everything stands. When we send a filing to Florida and New York, one national client, you're pushing 16 filings out all at once. It becomes a lot of data to manage. So instead of them sending us an email, hey, I'm waiting, when's Washington coming back, or that, they get instant access. They see when we sent the filing. And what happens is it's a game of yin and yang. So it's kind of like you guys do the frick and frack between franchisees. We do that with the state examiners. They'll send a letter back and they'll say, well, we don't like, they'll send 10 comments. A new franchisor, maybe 30 comments. And so we have to deal with those comments. They didn't like this. And, oh, well, the accountant sent the form in the wrong way. And, we mostly have a handle on what they're going to ask, but they're they're justifying their jobs. So they're always going to ask something. So you just have this back and forth, and that creates anxiety. So we've just created a completely transparent platform where the platform is looking at our internal software that we've spent a fair amount of money and a number of years developing. It's customized. Trust me, I wish I had something off the shelf, but we're such a narrow industry that there was nothing that existed, all the jargon and everything. So we custom designed it from the ground up. And so our clients now get a view into our basically back office. So they don't have to ask. And that, it lowers the stress level. Like, hey, I see. And then we kind of created best practices. So we explain, look, New York, you're going to have to wait this amount of time. This is what it typically takes. This is what they're asking for. And then they can communicate it to you instead of it being a fire drill. So it's worked pretty well. And it also manages the FDD update process because, as I mentioned, there's 23 items plus a bunch of stuff in the front end on the cover pages, a bunch of stuff on the exhibits. And so we can't update it unless our client gives us the data. And yeah, it's like doing your taxes or going to the dentist. Nobody wants to actually update and do this stuff. So we're chasing them for info. So we created a platform that just centralizes it, and some things we have to be reviewing. So we're reviewing it. We're waiting on info from the client or they're reviewing it, and it just gamifies it. So it streamlines it. It makes it less stressful, and it's working out really well. Clients are super happy about it.
It's brilliant. And I think you're like the only people that are doing this. So
I think so. And I'll tell you, one of the things that helps is that we have an incentive to do it because we don't charge hourly. So one of the separating points of us as a law firm is that dealing with those entrepreneurs, as I mentioned, we want to create incentives for them to call us, to ask us real questions, not just, am I updated? So that flat all-in subscription model is conducive to us creating software that say, look, I don't want to waste the time either. You don't want to waste the time. Our interests are on the same page. Pay us our monthly fee and we'll take care of it efficiently, and everybody can just go build their franchise.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. So are you saying then there's 23 registration states or filing states?
No, 23 items. It's like 16.
So do you need 16 different FDDs? Or does it have to be specific for the state, like New York or Illinois or Washington State?
So there's one federal document. That document isn't filed anywhere. That's just like self-regulated. So any of these green states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, once you have the federal document updated, you're good to go in those states. So second we issue the document, 2/3 of the states, you don't lose any time in those states. But then the other states, you file the FDD and they may request specific things. Hey, you have to change X, Y, and Z. And then we make a judgment call with our clients. Look, if we change this here, should we change it everywhere? And usually the changes aren't substantive. So you end up with the same FDD everywhere. And sometimes emerging brands will have 2 or 3 different FDDs. And that becomes a pain to manage. Like I said, we manage that in our software, but the states also will require an addendum for their specific state. So like, hey, in Maryland, for instance, no matter what you say in the document of where you would have a dispute, Maryland says, if you're a franchisee in Maryland, you have the right to go to court in Maryland. So no matter what the document says, we're overriding that. And so there are clauses like that in the various states that, we just kind of manage that process. So no, the goal is to always have one unified document.
That's great. I mean, the bigger reason I also wanted to have you on is to kind of share with people that are listening to the podcast that are thinking about franchising, to note that this is like much bigger than just some franchise guy selling a franchise. You have these attorneys working on this kind of stuff. You got the International Franchise Association. This is like so much bigger and so much more dialed in than just, some guy with a company trying to, sell you a business. So
and the upside's bigger. Right. And that's exactly right. So to me, don't do it unless you're going to, you're building a skyscraper. So you got to get the foundation right. And just like you said, if you're just going to open the second restaurant, double or triple, it goes back to what we started with. Just open another restaurant, don't franchise. Because if you franchise and you do it wrong, you're risking all that intellectual property. Someone else can run away with your name and your know-how. If you're trying to build something that's literally worth tens of millions of dollars, you should be realistic about the steps and the dollars and the time and the patient and the energy you're going to have to build. Although, you're hard pressed, except maybe for software. And unless you're like are super lucky or you're like, you know, Elon Musk, you're hard pressed to find a business that can take a mom and pop business. You invest a couple $100,000 in 4 or 5 years. And in 10 years, that thing is worth $20 million. There's not many businesses like that have that kind of residual income. So that's why you franchise. And I love to put people on that journey. And realistically, only 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4 get those kind of numbers. Most of them don't. They pick the wrong franchisees. They don't fail per se, but they don't like franchising. They just go back to running their business because they don't like the 6 unruly kids, as Harold said, running around. But those are pretty good odds, right? Buy a lottery ticket for $100 grand with a $20 million payoff in 10 years. I mean, 1 out of 5 shot. It's not bad.
Yeah, no, it's great. And the ripple effect of helping people and creating jobs in communities and all of that stuff, like we didn't even talk about, is just so great in the world of franchising. And that's
it's entrepreneurship, right? I mean, talk about the bedrock of the American dream. I mean, you want to control your destiny. Well, I mean, I'll ask you that, Tom. You've been now an entrepreneur as both a franchisee and as a consultant. Compare that emotionally to working for, not that there's anything wrong with working for somebody or a big organization, but how do you feel emotionally in terms of that?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. And it's, you know, it's like owning, it's like owning an apartment. Like if you have a job, it's like renting an apartment, right?
Right.
It's great. It's cool. You could decorate it, paint it your colors, but it's not yours. And one day you're going to be kind of out. In a house, you got to save up the down payment. You got to shop. You got to buy the right house in the right neighborhood. Now you're going to build it. You're going to have it. You're going to raise your kids there. You know, you're going to have it as long as you have pay the bills. But it sucks when the roof leaks. You got to fix it. You don't call anybody. You don't call the super. It's kind of like that. So 20 years later, when I just sold my house in Long Island after 29 years, and it was like, it's very emotional. There's so many things that happened there, good, bad, everything. But just I built it. I did it. It was like. It's just, I can't put it in words, as you can tell. It's just
you did
an amazing feeling. And I had a great job back in the day, working for the transit system, but I chose to control my own destiny, as you said, make a difference. And now literally I've had 2 of my past employees from 20 years ago call me to buy franchises.
That's awesome.
It's like, and now they're married with kids, and when they're working for me, they were 18 and 19 and whatever. Now, it's like, it's just so great, man.
It is great.
Just can't put it in words. I had one couple who actually met working, slinging smoothies for me and got married. If I didn't start that business, would they have ever met? I think about things like that. It's cool.
No, I agree. And to be part of that journey and to watch other people look, I have my business, my partner and I, and we love it. I mean, you get you're coaching, you're helping, and you're watching people really, really fulfill their own dream and destiny. And if we can just play our part, keep them safe, keep them online, that is, I like going to work every day. It's never dull. I mean, you work with entrepreneurs, it's never dull. That's for sure.
That is so true. Well, Tom, I don't want to keep you. I know that you have FDDs to file and but I really appreciate you coming on the show. This has just been a delight. How could people get in touch with you?
I think going to our website is probably the best way. SpadeaLaw.com is a good way. And also on LinkedIn. I mean, if you're in franchising and ever, it's Spadea, look up Tom Spadea franchise, and I'm sure you'll find me and connect with me, send me a note, send me a message. It's a small industry, right? I mean, we've known each other for a number of years. You run into people. So if you want to be involved in franchising, and even if I'm not, what I do, and if you need my services professionally, and don't worry, I'll ask you at the appropriate time. But if you just have a question and you just want to ask a question about franchising, I'm not going to be sending you an engagement letter. I love to help, especially if you're new to this industry and you just want to ask me a question, reach out, you pay it forward. A lot of people did that to me when I got started, and I love to do it back.
The franchise industry is an industry of paying it forward. That's one thing that I 100%. Took away, as we go to these meetings all over the country and we see each other, and we see, competing franchise owners, two CEOs of, like a McDonald's and a Burger King sitting at the same table,
Amazing.
talking about, the state of the industry and sharing, interesting stories. That is, when I saw that the first time ever, I was like, holy cow.
It's amazing.
It's so different than corporate America.
And whoever started that, everybody just embraces it, and it's kept going forward. And it's one of the things I love about this industry. You feel like we're competing against Mother Nature. We're all here to just survive and thrive. And and we're not trying to take it out of even our competitors. We're all just trying to move forward.
So great. Well, Tom, again, thank you so much for everything. We will talk again. And for those listening, if you want to find out more from Tom, go to my website, thefranchiseacademy.com. All of Tom Spadea's information will be on there, and all the contact information for the law firm. So again, thanks so much and have a great day. Take care.